Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gwen and today I have a book review for you about the book Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I am so excited to talk about this book, but a few warnings before I get into it. One is that this review will become spoiler heavy, so if you do not want any spoilers, this timestamp is where the spoilers will start. And two, there is some weird construction happening below my apartment, and so if you hear any construction noises, I apologize. So here's to jumping into this review. So before I go into specific topics, I'm just going to give you an overview. This is the second book in the trilogy for the Locked Tomb by Tamsin Muir, and it is entitled Harrow the Ninth. We are following Harrow after what has happened in Gideon the Ninth. We're talking about Harrow's life while she becomes a lictor, and that is what this book entails. Overall, I gave this book 4.75 stars out of 5. So let's jump into some of the subjects I wanted to highlight about this book. I highly recommend reading Gideon the Ninth and this book if you are so interested, but here is where I am going to be spilling some of the more finer details of this book. The first thing I wanted to mention was world building / lore. In the Ninth, we had a lot of small building of the world. We know the setting is in space. We know that all 9 houses are on their own separate planets and that they all traveled, this small cohort of people traveled to the first house planet and decided this is where you're going to learn how to be a lictor for the, what is he called? Emperor? I think that's what they referred to him a lot as the Emperor in the first book, but he has like so many names. That's what Gideon the Ninth had us understand, was this simple layered system, and then all the 9 houses had separate fields of necromancy that they excelled at. So in Harrow the Ninth, though we know all these things, in Gideon the Ninth, it felt more like the world was still fantasy-esque. There wasn't a lot of space stuff that was referenced. And then this second book, sci-fi just slams you in the face. And I kind of felt very thrown off, especially in the first part, because we enter into a space station / shuttle, I think. And we're in the military section of this world. The Emperor's military to all of the 9 houses. And the military is only referenced a little bit in the first book because Gideon thinks that that was her path to be part of the military so she could escape being part of the 9th house. And we didn't really get a lot of information on how the military system works. And so when you enter the second book, it's a bit overwhelming, especially with the fact where Harrow's mind is in at the time, because again, we're in Harrow's perspective. So at the beginning of this book, her perspective is very drowsy and not all there. With that being said, after part 1 with the lore and world building, it was pretty steady and very understanding after that. Also here, I wanted to make a note because I forgot to say this. The book has 5 distinct parts in it. So when I'm referencing the very first part, I do mean the actual section of part 1. So the next topic I wanted to talk about is characters. We have not a ton of new characters that are involved with this second book. There's still a lot of characters coming back from the old one, but the characters we were introduced to and the characters that came back, I fully enjoyed everyone. There was tons of gray characters, which I do enjoy. I do enjoy not knowing fully if someone's gonna help or hinder or kill someone in some regards to the storyline. So I didn't have any issues with character development, motivations, or desires, and everyone's interactions with everyone else were either really hilarious, super intriguing, or downright overwhelming. There were some instances of being really overwhelmed by information because there's a lot to learn in lictorhood. The only other point I want to make about characters is something with Harrow, but that will be in the heavy spoiler section of this video. It's part of a spoiler, and I want to make sure that part is placed way at the end. Third topic that I wanted to talk about is the magic system. Now, in the previous book, Gideon the Ninth, we have seen what necromancy is like in this world, and it's very detailed. It's so minute. The way that necromancy works, and necromancy is very different for all of the necromancers. Depending on which house you come from, your necromancy is focused on something very, very different from each. So when we join up with Harrow, her necromancy of course is focused on bones, specifically skeletons, but anything in the human anatomy of bones is where Harrow is like a genius at, apparently, allegedly, according to all the other necromancers. When we started adding more information about lictorhood into Harrow's very advanced knowledge of necromancy, there wasn't a lot to add. I didn't feel like the magic system added anything more in this book, and I also didn't feel like we got more answers to some of it. So I still enjoy it, but I kind of wish there was some like cool stuff added in. There may have been some cool stuff added at the very end, but once again, don't want to spoil it. Moving on, the last topic that I want to bring up before we get into heavy spoiler territory with the narrative is writing style. I do like Myonna's writing, but there were some instances that just didn't feel I fully liked how they were written. Let me talk about the positive first. So the writing that was in Gideon that I really, really loved was the back and forth with dialogue. The dialogue was so good. I think Myonna does a very good job with layering a conversation very well, making it feel like too many people are talking at the same time, or these funny one-liners or pokes or prods at a different character to make fun of them or to insinuate something more directly is really, really fun. And she brings that into Harrow the Ninth as well, and it's one of my favorite aspects of her writing, and especially reading this narrative like it is, because this story doesn't take itself so seriously all the time. And I really enjoy that aspect while reading it. Now, she also added second person for the first time. I wanted it in third perspective of Harrow with the knowledge that Harrow has. But I said, okay, you know what? I've read second person before. It's fine. The reveal's great. Okay. I don't know how to express that it was done very well second person, but at the same time, those chapters were the most aggravating for me to read up until part 4 of the book. So were they done well if I kept on getting annoyed? Or was the character written in a way that this is how they always thought, and because we never got a full perspective in Gideon the Ninth with Harrow, this would be the first time we're actually in her brain and how she thinks, and it felt weird and it felt off. Now, if that was the point of the writing, great job, because it made me feel that way. But the other part in these chapters that I didn't like was that while Harrow was learning about lictorhood, we also were given a lot of new vocabulary and a lot of words that I just didn't know. And this happened in Gideon the Ninth. However, it didn't feel as overwhelming to me, and I didn't feel like I couldn't understand what was going on still. Whereas in this book, I felt the opposite. I felt very overwhelmed with some of the words that we were given to try to understand, because it felt like none of the other characters were explaining in-depthly enough what was going on. It drove me to not want to like those chapters because I couldn't understand them. And so for that first half of the actual book, not the part 1 or part 2, but the first half of the actual book, I had a lot of issues dealing with Harrow and learning about lictorhood, and that was a problem, and I thought I was going to enjoy it. And I really do think it's because of how the writing worked around that point, and not necessarily, I wouldn't say it was second person that ruined it. I would say that I just didn't feel like some of those areas of learning about lictorhood were fully developed or understood. I'm not sure who's to blame in this situation. And I don't want to blame anyone, but I don't know if it's, again, my comprehension of that part of the book, or if that was the way you were supposed to interpret it through Harrow, that it was overwhelming and you just kind of had to take it all in and just hope you understood what this older lictor just told you. Let me know if you have read this book how you felt about the first half of the book, because I just don't know if it's me or the book or the writing. I don't know anymore. I do want to say overall that I did enjoy the narrative and the writing for the most part. It was just the understanding of those sections that I had issues with, just to make that clear. So for this last section, I'm going to be talking about two different things. One point's positive, one point's negative. In order to explain my con for this book, because I want to start with the con, I have to kind of go over pretty much the entire 3/4 of this storyline until it completely changed in part 5, which means that that would be 4/5 of the storyline. So Harrow wakes up. Harrow doesn't feel great, and Harrow blacks out on the spaceship after having a conversation with the Emperor, the Undying King, God, John, whichever you want to call him, and we get pulled into a timeline that didn't happen. Or did it? The timeline breaks I loved. I loved these chapters immensely. So there's your pro, right? Like, I loved these. I thought they were so interesting. I love seeing all of these characters come back. Then, as we go through the parts of the story, we keep on getting little snippets. Why is Ortis, the lictor, wanting to kill her so badly? Why do we have other little pinpoints of people saying, who messed with your temporal lobe? And then, I think it's part 4, we finally get the notion of who is narrating the second perspective. Don't want to spoil who that is, but the second perspective then gets told, and very final chapter in part 4 breaks down what has been going on in Harrow's brain. You know, at this point in the book, you kind of understand that this definitely would have happened. Like, you're kind of getting the idea, okay, this happened at some point with these two people, but when? And I was thinking that Harrow had done this for a reason, that like something was going to happen on this ship that they're on for the lictors, and she needed to protect herself, so she removed parts of her memory to have a different timeline. But no, that wasn't it. And this is where the reveal becomes my con. This is my con and pro, right? Like, I loved this alternative storyline, but the reveal just didn't hit the same. The reason why Harrow, as far as I could ascertain from the work and the narrative, the reason why she wanted to forget was because of Gideon. She did not want her memory to have this person anymore because of grief. And for me, I felt like the Harrow we had met in the first book wasn't someone who was so hung up on grief that it would destroy her this badly. I felt like she was more of a character who really thought ahead, who was always 2 to 10 paces ahead of everybody else and knew what was going to happen. Her grief was so powerful that she needed it to be removed in order to stay sane, is what it kind of sounded like. But she had also prepared for her death within those letters, and she knew her body was going to be used by someone else eventually, which is very interesting to realize that she did plan for every outcome up to the point of her death, but it didn't feel conclusive to me, her end. It did not feel like her character arc felt completely whole or even real. It didn't feel like a complete end to a character that I thought I understood. And so before even the actual last few chapters we get in the perspective of Harrow, I had a moment of like, I need to reevaluate this book. So I literally tabbed so much because I wanted to find all these links and I wanted to figure out if I had missed something. Did I misunderstand something? Did I misconstrue something? But I didn't. After rereading certain sections, I just felt there was something missing with this memory loss storyline. And I still don't know if I fully understood how it concluded, but my hope is that we get a better explanation in book 3, or more of an understanding in book 3. Now, the rest of the story, the rest of part 5 was just perfect. And it wouldn't have been perfect without the storylines that were given previously throughout the book. But that's why I loved this storyline and the story overall, is because it all interlocked and it did such a great job with connecting everything. And the reveals that we get at the end of this book are just great. I loved them. I had no problem with most of the reveals that happened throughout the book and at the end. Oh, I can't wait for the third book. So that is it for this review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. And if you skipped all the way to the end, I don't think there's gonna be anything really new here at the end. Just know that I really overall enjoyed this book. As always, linked down below are donation websites and petitions to sign for current things going on in the world that need our attention, and also the Black Lives Matter movement. Along with all of that information are my social media links if you want to follow me anywhere else on the internet. And I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.